All right, we're live again. I thought I was live this morning, but I just found out I just came alive.
I didn't feel very alive this morning. It
You
was
didn't?
rainy and dark in our bedroom.
Uh, sometimes that's the best time to sleep, though. So you got to admit to it. I,
Yeah,
I know
well,
when my dog. Yeah, I know when my dogs aren't waking me up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. It's rain. It's always there. It's always rain. Man, we got somebody here. We better run over here and play this intro.
let's get
I'm
started.
gonna do it. All right, we are going to have a good time today, mainly because I think this is it's definitely one of my favorite subjects, and I'm pretty sure Carter, it's one of yours.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of y'all have ever sat around a fire smoking cigars and drinking bourbon with Carter. He will start telling the tales of yarn and stories. They may not be marketing stories, but he can spin a tale. So I'm just gonna uh, talk a little bit about you for a minute and make some fun of you. Is that all right? Can I
Yeah,
do
I'm going to pick up my dog so she'll stop barking.
Okay, that'll be good. So we were on a road trip, and I don't remember exactly what the story was, but there was something about a fish or something that was started out being like this big. And by the end of the trip, with every person he told the story, the fish, you remember that? It got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I said, man, by the time we get home, you got a whale. That was fun, but it really does kind of explain how we love stories and how our brains are really just wired for stories. And so I think using stories in marketing and in your sales process is one of those things that if you can implement and implement well, it does really, really well. So I'm gonna turn this first thing over with, and you can make fun of me too. I'm all
Oh,
right.
no, no, no. I mean, we both do it. We tend to, you hold to the facts a little bit more. I grew up in a family whose, I think the motto was, you know, never stop at 3 words when, to describe something when 10 words will do. And the other maxim to live by was never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So
Well, your dad was an attorney
yeah, and a great storyteller. But
and a great storyteller.
but
There
yeah,
you go.
so story is always been something that's captivated me and been a, and this will have some practical discussions and things to talk about here. But story is the way I kind of see the world. I mean, I wrote a book years ago when I started my branding agency before we started Spark Marketer, called Branding with Fire. And the whole thing was about story. I mean, the whole thing was about how human beings evolved around campfires and with an oral tradition of passing down legacy and facts and information and how to live the good life, and all of that was oral and all of that was story. And there's no question that our brains are wired that way, and I we could get into the neurology of it. Bottom line is that when a group of human beings enter into a story and engage in a story together, all of the dynamics change. The whole brain lights up in ways that they don't see it light up when just dealing with rote facts or scientific argument or reason or any other form of communication or thought. And so naturally, as a marketer, I'm curious about how story connects with two things. Number one, the need that a company has to sell its product. How can story be used to do that? But perhaps even more importantly, or closer to my heart, is how do we um, how do we connect as marketers with consumers to help them realize that we have something that can really solve a need for them and make their lives better. So story is capable of that. And story, finding the right story, the story that resonates, the story that people can see themselves in. That's the key to really effective marketing.
And I think you hit on something when you said when a story is woven to where your customer can see themselves in it, that really is why stories work. Because once somebody sees themselves a part of a story or can insert themselves into a story, then all of a sudden they they encompass it. It becomes a part of who they are because they are now seeing something that maybe happened in their life or they want to happen in their life or something that they are now actively involved in this story. And so when you're actively involved in something, you think about it totally different than if you're passively just watching. Oops, your audio just went out, bud.
Sorry, I was still muted. I'll give you a good example of that. Um, when you're in a restaurant and you're sitting there reading your menu, waiting for the waiter to come by, and you're overhearing a conversation one table over, and it's somebody who's telling a story to the person that they're sitting with and having dinner with, and you can completely relate to the story. I mean, you can see yourself in it, but and you've got questions about what they're saying, and it's so interesting to you, and you would love to just swivel around in your chair and drag it over to their table and sit there and listen and ask questions and become, a part of what's going on. But we're not allowed to do that, right, in polite society or in polite company, so we don't. But it's not an accident. In other words, in becoming a part of someone else's story. Think about this as a company with your customers, getting your customers to be a part of your story and buy into who you are. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to invite them into that story. And the moment you make that invitation, you now have somebody who's not only enthralled with who you are and what you're saying, but they feel connected in a way that they didn't feel connected when they were just an observer standing outside the bubble, outside the light of the fire, if you want to use that ancient analogy of storytelling. So you got to invite them in around the fire so that they can be a part of it. And marketing is brilliant for that. And making that invitation through good marketing and good calls to action is how we do that.
Yeah. So Jerry just made the comment: the good subject as a memorial story will cement you in your customer's brain. Using the right story can be magic. Yeah, that is so true, Jerry. Really appreciate that. And the thing too to remember about stories that I think you really sometimes we don't realize that our whole being thinks in stories. I mean, we are so much a creation around storytelling that a lot of us don't realize that the way we think is storytelling. And one of the things that happens, and this is one of the things I wanted to bring up because I think it's something we don't think about often, that if you leave gaps in stories for your customers, they fill the gaps with their own stories. And most of the time, what they're filling the gaps with are not the right stories.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, and so what happens is you're giving them part of the story, which is we're gonna, and this may sound crazy, but when you say, "Hey, I'm going to be coming out and going to be taking care of you at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning. Going to be there first thing. Make sure all these things are done. Yada yada yada." 9 o'clock comes. You're not there. You haven't called them. You haven't filled in the gap. You're struggling. Whatever. You're trying to get there. You're in traffic. Whatever's happening between 9 and 9:45 when you pull up, your customer has created an entire different story around the situation. The story, it could be, he or she forgot about me. Oh my gosh, I need to call the company and see what's going on. How dare they forget about me? They haven't called me. Were they in an accident? I mean, I can tell you all kinds of things that can happen when you don't communicate, because a story is something that's linear, it keeps going. So if you don't continue the story with your client through the journey of their customer journey, they are going to create something. They're going to fill the gap. Why is that? Because we all think in story.
We all think in story, but we also think of the story and fill in the gaps about stories we don't fully understand all the details about, but we do it from our own unique perspective, right? We rarely give people the benefit of the doubt or tell the story the way that we think they might tell it. Have you ever sat around listening to husband and wife, and somebody says, "Oh, tell that story about that time," and the husband starts the story, and the wife's like, "No, you're not telling it right," and then she starts in and to correct all the mistakes that her husband is making in telling the story. But the mistakes really aren't necessarily mistakes. It's just a different point of view. And the wife thinks that the things to focus on that are important in this story are the things that are important in her point of view, not the things that the husband found important in the husband's point of view in the telling of the story. And so the magic in marketing is figuring out how to tell the story of who you are in the language of your customer, in the language of your best customers, in the language of the people who have been the happiest with the services that you provided. When you can do that, then you're capturing the imagination of people who see themselves in your story, not because they imagine what it's like to run a 5-truck chimney operation, but because they imagine what it would be like to be a customer who has been satisfied and happy with the service of a 5-truck chimney operation. So we a lot of times tackle this, and I'm looking at Terry's comment here, which is great. Yeah, the About Us page, the About Me page, the About Our Company, that's a great place to tell that story. And it can be a wonderful place for people who are driven by feeling connected to the companies that they do business with. And so it's a great place to tell stories. Make sure when you use that page, though, that you're doing it in a way that describes it's not all just about my company and what we've done and all of our accomplishments, but subtly you can answer all of those things, the who, what, why, where, how, and when, but at the same time make it focused on the customer. You can answer those questions that people have about who you are, but do it in a way that satisfies or that shows them that you're mirroring to them who they are. And
I think that's great.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's some subtleties there. Maybe we'll have time to go into that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing, and this what you touched on is kind of this co-creation.
Yeah.
It really is that we really co-create things together. And even the example, and I've had this happen many times when I start a story, and my wife goes, "No, no, that wasn't it." But by the time we finish between her version and my version, we have co-created probably something that was closer to the truth,
or further away,
or
but at least
further.
coherent. At least both of you have agreement. And in
Yeah,
those storytelling moments where you're co-creating a story, there's something else that emerges there that is even more important than the factual truth of the way it actually happened. And that is the agreement between two people that allows for the smooth operation of a relationship, right? And that's
yeah,
important, right?
yeah,
Sometimes the facts can get in the way. Sometimes the facts of your business are, "Man, we failed you. We didn't get the job done like we told you we would," right? That's a hard fact to swallow. And just being honest about that fact helps to tell a story. And now by admitting that, you've invited your customer to say, "Well, stuff happens. I understand. And now what's going to happen next? Like, how's this story end?" Right?
right.
And by inviting the customer into that process of co-creating the story, you're much more likely to have that story end with a happy ending, a happily ever after, if you will, than if you just simply drive home the facts and don't give the customer any input into how the story gets told.
And really, a good subject matter and a great story will leave a lasting impression with others. But there's another really interesting thing about stories, and this is where marketing really comes in, and that's this: stories actually change minds because they do seduce us. We are so wired for story that if we have a choice between facts and a great story, a lot of times we choose the story. And that's why sometimes in marketing, if I had this conversation this morning with some of my employees, is guys, all the different facts about all the things, all the features that you see in something, in a product, a service, or whatever, they're great, but people really don't care. Because if I put a lot of features on the left side and I give you all the benefits and tell you how they're going to make your life wonderful and weave a story around those benefits, I can seduce you with those benefits. I will never be able to seduce you with facts and figures and features. The only people that are seduced by that are engineers.
That's a fair point. I mean,
Yeah.
I love a good spec list,
Yeah.
because I think that way sometimes, and but yeah, in the end, what can I do with this thing? With all these specs, how does that translate into making my life either better or to make my life make me able to accomplish something that I've set out to do? And if you can paint the picture for me, tell the story of the way that using your product gets me there, then yeah, I'm seduced. I'm in.
So that brings me to something that I'm going to give credit to Donald Miller with this, because this is the person that I heard this from the first time. That the power of a story, you can really see it in something called narrative transportation. And that is when the story is absolutely so powerful that you or your client or customer will totally reject the truth. And the reason I put this up to there is I've had clients that are like, I don't know how this got away from me, but it doesn't matter what I say or what I do. This customer is just off the rails. And it's because whatever story that they have concocted or think that's going on is so powerful in their minds that they totally reject any truth around it. You know, I see it a lot in our country without getting political. I see it a lot everywhere. And when I saw this statement, it was like, oh my gosh, everybody needs to understand this so that we don't get seduced away from facts that are real and truth that are really important to us. And that includes our customers.
It
That
does.
includes what we do. I mean, we need to be able to tell a great story, but we also need to be truthful, because eventually facts will matter down the road somewhere. Because if a fire happens in a house, when you go to court, they're going to deal with facts.
Yeah.
And something has happened there, and something was woven to get away from that. So that's something I want to put out here. And I know it sounds like a great deal if you could spin this story that's so powerful that you can overcome anything. But the reality is that's not true when you get into areas that people can get hurt.
Well, you always want. I mean, as an ethical business, you always want your story to be factual and truthful.
Sure.
You need the telling of that story to be appealing and told in a way that attracts others into the story. But yeah, no, absolutely, it needs to be true. Where I think the real this statement here, when the story is so powerful, um, customers will reject the truth. I think that's best summed up in what you just said. That sometimes when you haven't done a good job of communicating, right? There's a void. The they turn the page ready to read what happens next, and it's a blank page. You haven't supplied the information to them. They create the story instead, and that story is so powerful in their own minds that no matter what truth you tell them next will be rejected because they've made up their mind. They know they have now taken control of the story, and so that's what I see here in what you're saying.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
absolutely, we've seen it time and time again.
Mhm.
I mean, a great example of this are reviews. Reviews are mini stories,
That's right.
and they're the telling of what happened. And sometimes when you see it go horribly wrong, you can look in the details of that story and realize at this crucial moment in this review, if that business had done a better job of communicating what this person is about to tell us next, never would have happened. This review would not exist in the world if the business owner had done a better job of nipping it in the bud, communicating before the need was there, to try to correct the facts. And you know, it didn't happen, and now there's a review out there, a story that will live forever, a very powerful story that will live forever, that may not be the truth of who your company really is, but it doesn't matter, because many other consumers are going to come along and read it, and they're going to believe that story instead of yours.
Unless you come behind them and answer it with your story.
Again, yes.
Again, yes. Yes. And then the consumers that come behind it have the option, which story are they going to believe? You know, and a lot of times they'll believe the side of the company because they know there are some crazy people out there. And it just that's the way it works. So, man, we hope you guys have enjoyed this. We could probably do this for hours and go through all kinds of stuff. But I really wanted to just give you guys an overview on the power of story. Thank you guys so much that have given us a thumbs up and a like. I know that Facebook likes this, and everything is great. So if you haven't done that, if you'll give us a like or a heart or something, I'd really appreciate that. That's great. Thank you very much, Terry. We really appreciate you every week coming on. It's just so much fun when we have people on here that are live. We get a lot of people after the fact, which is good too. But it's nice to have some people on here when it's live. So just a couple of things here. Want you guys to know that Spark Live, if you're not able to be here, it can be found in the following places: Audible, Spotify, Apple Podcast. And while I'm talking about podcast, I want to stop a minute because I also want to give some shout outs to some podcasts that are out there. I know that Jerry Eisenhower does a podcast on Fridays. I'm not exactly sure when it is because I tend to miss it and have to go do the reruns, and that's okay because I find them. But this week, especially for anybody that's struggling with hiring, he is going to have a guest from Applicant Pro on his podcast tomorrow. And Jerry, if you're here, if you're still here, I don't know if you are. He said, good job. Good to know your wives complete your stories. Yep, Jerry's here. Thanks, Jerry. Anyway, just want to make sure you can get that because we've just contracted with them and trying them out as well. They seem to be a really good company. He just put in 12:15 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, so that would be great if you can do that. But
tomorrow
also
being Friday the 29th.
Friday, yeah. The 28th, yeah. And he does a rerun of that too, and you can find it on Facebook. The other one, though, Surefire, does one at, I believe, at 6 p.m. Central Time on Tuesdays, Tuesday evenings. They do a great job. There's some podcasts now. I know Jake Loeffler, John Caesar, Chad Murray. They all do podcasts now. I mean, there's people that are out there that are starting to tell their stories and give information on operations and different things than marketing. And I just want to give them all a shout out because, you know, everybody takes their time and really starting to really build, especially in the chimney industry and some of the other home service businesses. And I just wanted to take a minute and shout everybody out that I knew. And if I've missed somebody, let me know and I'll talk about you next week. I promise. So speaking of next week, so we're going to talk about why having up-to-date business listings is important to your local marketing. We've had a few questions about that. And the other thing that's coming up, I think probably in the next couple of weeks, we've actually had some people that have requested some content. And so we're going to be talking about requested content from some of our listeners. So that's going to be fun too. So I'm just going to ask you again, if you have something that's come up or something you've thought about and want to know the answer to that's marketing related, please contact me. Again, I'm Taylor at sparkmarketer.com, Carter at sparkmarketer.com, either one of us, and we'll research it and get that part of our content coming up. So with that, guys, thanks so much again for being here. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Talk about business listings. Bye-bye.